Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Fellow in Focus with Torsten Wollina, who we're going to hear from in a moment. He's in conversation with Anna Chahoud. However, I just want to simply welcome you all to this and to our virtual Trinity Longroom Hub. My name is Jane Oldmeyer, and I'm the director of the Trinity Longroom Hub, which is our institute advanced studies in the arts and humanities. In the Hub, we do three things. We celebrate the excellence of the arts and humanities Trinity. We promote conversations across disciplines, and we're going to get a great example of that today. And then the third thing we do is public humanities. And ironically, the lockdown has meant that we have to do everything virtually, and it allows us to reach audiences that we simply were never able to reach before. So I guess that's the silver lining in all of this. Usually when we have our Fellow in Focus, it's in the beautiful Longroom Hub building in the center of the lovely campus at Trinity, but there might be 20, 30 people in the room. Here we're able to engage with so many more, so that's fantastic. I want to say a few words about our fellows, because the Hub is made up of an amazing community of early career researchers and visiting fellows. And we've been very fortunate to have this Marie Curie funded COFUND program, which has allowed us over the course of the last 3 years to bring in every year 3 COFUND fellows, and Torsten is one of them. And they've been part of our community for 12 months, and they have just enriched everything enormously. It's been such a privilege working with our COFUND fellows. Obviously, the lockdown has disrupted things a little bit, but actually it hasn't in any way diminished the power of the community, and we still are meeting very regularly virtually. And I think today's Fellow in Focus will really illustrate just how much certainly Torsten has continued to do despite everything with the lockdown. I'll have an opportunity at the end to thank Torsten, but I'm very sad that our fellows now are getting ready to leave us, and I know Torsten has a wonderful job that he's going to in Berlin, but you've been a very important and special part of the community at the Trinity Longroom Hub. So I'm so delighted that we'll be hearing from you. And I'm so delighted that Anna Chahoud is leading that conversation, because Anna is a very dear colleague and friend. She's in our classics department. She's professor of Latin, and she's also the champion for one of the research themes that the Hub supports, the manuscript print culture theme. And Anna, you've done phenomenal work as the co-convener of the theme. And I think what's been particularly important has been this relationship with the library at Trinity, and how so many of our fellows come. I think it's 40% of all fellows who come to the Trinity Longroom Hub work on our phenomenal collections in the library. And today we're going to hear about the Arabic collections, and obviously a lot more about the online exhibition that Torsten has been working with in partnership with the library. And a special shout out here for Jane Maxwell, who has been a joy. She's always a joy to work with, but she's been a particular joy to work with in this context. So really, without further ado, Anna, can I hand the floor over to you and leave you to have that in conversation with Torsten. And just to remind colleagues to ask questions, use the Q&A function that is at the bottom of your screen, and then Anna will be feeding those in after about 20-25 minutes of conversation. So there's plenty of opportunity for questions and wider discussion. So Anna, welcome and thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jane, and thank you for your kind words and for reminding us of the lovely building. We were looking at the background, the Longroom Hub, the students sitting in Fellow Square. It's made me really nostalgic, but we'll go back. And you're absolutely right that the conversations have continued, and you've made that possible in a way that I couldn't have imagined. And with Torsten, we had lovely conversations inside the building, in my office, outside the building during the year, and we've continued throughout. He's made a huge contribution to research in our college, as well as making phenomenal progress with his own project. Now, I don't want, this is really about Torsten and not about me, and I would want to hand over to him straight away. Obviously, we call him Torsten. This is Dr. Torsten Wollina, PhD from Berlin, and with a 5-year work experience in Beirut. And the qualifications that he brought to us combined were found in our research environment, both in the academic areas of the university and in the library, a fruitful place for your research. To begin the conversation, may I ask you, Torsten, to tell everyone, and hello everyone, and thank you for listening, what were the specific reasons that after your already international career brought you to Trinity and to the Long Room Hub and to manuscript, book and print cultures in particular, thinking that it might be a fruitful environment for your work?
So first of all, thank you, Jane, for the introduction, and thank you, Anna, for the introduction and the first question. So I think these introductions already bring out one of the reasons why I wanted to come to Dublin. It's a very supportive and hospitable environment for doing research. And I have been, I've spent half a year in Dublin, my early 20s, without any connection to research whatsoever. But even so, the city has had a very special place in my heart ever since. It's a place full of stories and full of people willing to share those stories. And so in the years that followed that, I returned to Dublin several times and discovered the places that are interesting to someone working on Arabic manuscripts, but also Arabic texts in general. There are definitely the Chester Beatty Library, which is known worldwide and has several thousands of Arabic manuscripts. There is also Marsh's Library, which is lesser known, but a very interesting library because it's still in the state, kind of, that it was in the 18th century when it was founded. And it looks a little bit like the library that I have as my background, which is Trinity Library, which is the third collection of Arabic texts in Dublin. And I must admit that before I had my interview with Jane, Anna, and several other people from Trinity College, I did not know of this collection in Trinity Library. And this year that I spent here gave me the opportunity to get to know this collection better. And I feel that it really needs to be highlighted. Even though it is small in scale, it's a very important collection in terms of the history of European engagements with Arabic as a language and the Middle East as a place and all the cultures that it contains. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Torsten. That is brilliant. And I suppose my next question is about the very practical reason that brought you here, and that is your Marie Curie funded COFUND Fellowship, which had a very strong project, which you were able to expand to incorporate some of the material that you've discovered here. Can you say something about your original project and the connections that you were able to make between that and the Trinity collections?
So with this, I'll switch my background. My original project is called Stamping Provenance, and it revolves around the library of the person who, where is it here? This stamp, who made this stamp. And this is Ahmad Taimur, early 20th century collector in Cairo, who built up a collection of manuscripts, which is more than 7,000 manuscripts strong. He also built a library, which is around 21,000 books strong. And I came across this person when I was doing a different research project on an author from 16th century Damascus. So a lot of that person, his name is Ibn Tulun, a lot of his autographed manuscripts, so manuscripts written in his own hand, ended up eventually in the library of Ahmad Taimur. So I kept coming across that library again and again, and there is very little research literature on that library itself. There is a lot of research literature that uses manuscripts from that library, but there is very little on that library itself. And so my project is part of a longer term project that wants to center the library of Ahmad Taimur. And that entails a number of things. That entails the choice of manuscripts that he wanted to acquire, the sources of manuscripts that he acquired, and also then obviously the question, what did he do with those manuscripts once he had them? And I want to say that I don't want to look at this in terms of which manuscripts did he read and then what did he write about those, but rather I want to focus on the bibliographical practices. So he inscribed manuscript reference numbers to all those manuscripts. He also wrote short descriptions and annotations in those manuscripts, sometimes full table of contents for a manuscript. And in the course of my Marie Curie Fellowship, I looked at the book stamps, some of which you can see in the background now. And these book stamps are important because, at least in Egypt and Syria, they only come up in large numbers by the late 18th to late 19th century. And so in what I'm trying to find out is, where are they used? How are they used? Where are they put on pages of a manuscript? And in a special way, they allow us to identify people who owned those manuscripts before Ahmad Taimur did. So, yeah.
What you describe, reminds me of the excitement that some of us in my line of research, which is classics, had when they first looked at even a reproduction, never mind the original, of some humanist annotated manuscripts with the date, the earliest example of a cataloging system, the reasons why this was acquired, or even Mr. Petrarch gave me this, or actually Mr. Boccaccio gave me this signed Petrarch. That is the kind of thing that really brings to life a book, not just as an object for research. And this is what, as an object that has its history, that it connects with the history of its people, of its time, and this is very much at the center of what we do in manuscript and book and print cultures, to look at things in an interdisciplinary and sort of holistic kind of way, while also encouraging the specific expertise that is needed to make sense of this material. Because you can see, from just your background, you have to be a very skilled reader of a number of varieties of written Arabic, and a very skilled at recognizing stamps and making connections. I suppose there's a lot in your research about connections, isn't there?
Yes, I want to say that connections as well as networks, as well as a certain focus on infrastructure of that manuscript trade. And this is also what kind of connects my project on Ahmad Taimur to my project on Trinity Library. If I may change my background again. So I'm looking at connections, and maybe I'll just put that to the side for a bit, that you can see it. So this is basically a network that comes out in the manuscript trade of the 17th century, the manuscript trade between the Ottoman Empire and England. And I'm working on establishing a similar networks for Ahmad Taimur. Where did he find his manuscripts? Which people helped him to acquire manuscripts beyond his own city of Cairo in the larger region? And we should also not forget that by the early 20th century, new techniques of manuscript copying come into play. There is, for instance, photography as a new technology of manuscript reproduction. Later, by the mid 20th century, we have obviously the microfilm as one of the means by which manuscripts can be reproduced and read in different places with their own. So that creates problems for people who work on the provenance of the physical manuscripts, because sometimes you might encounter microfilms of manuscripts in different libraries in all corners of the world, but they all rely on the same physical manuscript, but they might not show it.
Yeah, yeah, that's very important. And again, it reminds us of the materiality of the book, which is a key aspect of our research now, as well as obviously the content and the meaning of the work inscribed in the book. How did you, when you mentioned your discovery of the Trinity collection, when you first came, and we had again, memorable meetings with Jane Maxwell in the library about this, and I know that Jane, I'm grateful to her just as much as you are for all the work that she has developed with you. She has done with you to develop your project. Can you say something about what you found, how many, and how you got some idea about what it could be done with them?
So yes, I also have to thank Jane Maxwell, because she and also her colleagues at the Manuscript Room have helped me tremendously, pointing me to some unpublished resources on the history of Trinity Library, of the catalogs, of the collections. And I don't think that this project would have come as far without such great support from everyone over at both the Hub and Trinity Library. Trinity has a small collection of manuscripts, of Arabic manuscripts. Depending on what you want to count as an Arabic manuscript, there are between 70 and 80 items. And I'm saying it depends on your definition, because there is a number of manuscripts that actually contain texts in more than one language. For instance, there is a Coptic manuscript, but it has in the margins an Arabic translation. And the question then is, do you classify that as an Arabic manuscript or not? We also have some items in the collection that are not manuscripts as such, and those are exciting as well. There is, for instance, a set of 3 Indian paintings from the 18th century, or there is an item called an Imam's staff, which comes with a little bit of documentation on the item's history. I have been focusing mostly on the early acquisitions before the 18th century. So this is the first Trinity Library comes into being in the 16th century. And the Arabic collection has its beginnings in 1671, when the large-scale library of Archbishop James Ussher was acquired. And we see this in the first catalog from 1670, and then the second catalog from 1688. And the person whose correspondence I've traced here in the background is the second person very important to the growth of Trinity's early Arabic collection. The collector and former provost of Trinity College, Robert Huntington, who gave a who gave a donation of 10 Arabic manuscripts and several other manuscripts in other non-European languages in 1682. And those early collections, while they appear in catalogs, have not been described yet in modern standard, like by modern standards. So we have some information about the titles of the works that are included in those manuscripts. They are most often kept in the original Latin that was used in Trinity College in the 17th century. And they mostly have been copied from catalog to catalog until the Abbott catalog of 1900. And I've been focusing on them because through Robert Huntington and these other networks that we have in the 17th century, most of those manuscripts can be traced back to the Ottoman Empire, and that is my area of interest. We have a very different provenance of manuscripts by the 19th century, like those manuscripts that entered Trinity College in the 19th century. Those are often tied to the British imperial, like the British Empire. And we have manuscripts coming in from the Indian subcontinent, in which I include Pakistan, like modern day Pakistan and Afghanistan. We also have manuscripts coming in from Nigeria and several islands around the African continent. So it's a very different, provenance of those manuscripts. It's a very different history of those manuscripts. And as far as I can say, those early manuscripts, they exclusively came to Trinity or to the respective collectors before that through purchase. I should also say that I focused on those manuscripts because there are some catalogs for the later acquisitions, but these early acquisitions needed an updated description, and this will also be part of the outcomes of my fellowship here, that some more detailed descriptions of these manuscripts will be given.
Well, you have covered some 350 years of Arabic manuscripts at Trinity, and made them available, for study, for research, and in a way that have never been possible before, right? And so I suppose the COVID-19 crisis, which in a way stopped your work in the old library, also prompted the speeding up of the online sharing through blogs, through an exhibition, of this material to the wider research community and to the wider public. So, I mean, you have a big exhibition that's just been opened, just launched, right?
Yes, and in this context, so I want to say that I could not have done that again without Jane Maxwell, but also without the help of Gillian Whelan, who is the senior digital photographer at Trinity Libraries, and Greg Sheaf, who is the web services librarian. And without the support and collaboration with these people, that exhibition would not have come out and not have come out so fast. I was surprised how fast that went. So in this exhibition, I'm trying to make accessible like the history of these early, or I'm trying to answer the question, why of all places we find this number of Arabic manuscripts in Dublin. And in doing that, I'm trying to also give the context of, like some of which I have mentioned already, like where do those manuscripts come from? How were they found by those collectors, and why were they looking for them in the first place? And I'm trying to tie this both to developments in the Ottoman Empire at the time and events to like in Dublin, as well as Ireland and Great Britain at the time. And it's an interesting, that's again an interesting ground for comparison with the other project, because also by the early 20th century, people who were interested in manuscripts and knowledgeable in those languages, they were seen as potential soft diplomats by state powers in the 20th century. If that was the same in the 17th century, requires more research, in my opinion, but we see certain connections there for sure. And this exhibition also gave me the opportunity to share some of the images from those manuscripts, so that people can, on the one hand, follow my arguments, but also test my arguments and come to different conclusions. I have, in preparation to this exhibition, I have done a series of blog posts, those were definitely, the reason why I made those was that we were all kept indoors, or should have stayed indoors, and probably still should stay indoors for most of the time. And so I'm definitely not an epidemiologist. Please excuse my pronunciation there. And I'm not a doctor. So I wondered what do I have to offer in this situation? And I thought that for people who work in my field or who are interested in Trinity Library and its holdings, it might be helpful to find a way to still work with those items that they love, or on those items from a distance. And through a series of 4 blog posts, I'm trying to give an idea how they can look at the provenance of the items that they're working with while they were in Trinity. So how can they identify, through those catalogs, they can identify how long those items have been at Trinity, and also what, how they were reshelved with every new catalog or not. So, yeah.
I have to say that I've rarely seen such a phenomenal combination of very strong research, a very high degree of specialization, and you came with your project that was big enough, but combined with this side project that became part of it, and acquired a dimension of accessible public history, as well as this is a huge service that you have made to us as an academic community, to the wider community. This is a wonderful example of how we can turn a crisis and the constraints of lockdown and isolation into opportunities to do things better, and even to do them quicker. You said earlier that you were surprised how fast your digital exhibition was put together. It's fabulous colleagues, everyone on board, and it could be done. And you have, for all of you who are viewing, you will have received the links to the exhibition. Don't miss it, because it's absolutely fabulous to look at. Now we have a couple of minutes to wrap up the more sort of formal presentation. Questions have already started coming in. So I suppose my last question is about your future directions. Where are you going from here? Jane mentioned a wonderful job you're going to, but in terms of your research interests, your trajectory, now what you have taken from this experience that you want to build on. Can you share some of that with us and everyone watching?
So that's a very wide question, and I hope I do it justice in my reply. So I want to say, my own trajectory led me from textual research of a work that was produced in 15th century Damascus to look at manuscript, like more at the like the trajectories of physical manuscripts based on that project on Ibn Tulun, and then looking further at trajectories not only of individual manuscripts but of full corpora. And what I learned so I extended that focus in this year by looking stronger at at library practices and librarian practices, which again is like happens on a very different scale. And also, especially the like Arabic manuscripts, you know, they're not always at the focus of librarians who have much larger numbers of Irish, English, Spanish, French manuscripts also to take care of. And so where I want to go with this is to keep the library as an institution, but also as a space at the center of my research. Yeah. And so in this new position, I hope to learn more about the perspective that librarians have on that, to relate that and put in conversation with my own researcher perspective on libraries. Sorry.
And your role, I mean, how do you see your role in this field in the next few years?
So I still think that I see myself as a mediator or broker between those different disciplines. And that is also one of the reasons why I need to understand the librarian perspective ever better in order to fulfill this role and to be fair to all sides involved. And at some point in the future, I see that moving towards the study of archives as well, and take serious the positions of archivists as well. That is one area where I'm still very much learning.
Yeah, because in archives you discover new things. I mean, this is what you have found in the few months at Trinity. And you know, when we spoke on another occasion, you know, I remember I asked you, you know, you go through our libraries and archives like an Indiana Jones trying to find things. And remember what you told me? So
I'm definitely against this notion, because in contrast to Indiana Jones, who wants to retrieve artifacts and destroys their context in the process, for all those who have seen those movies, I'm trying to do the opposite and reconstruct the context from those artifacts. And I think that that is the more interesting story than finding something, you know, that is made out of gold or paper.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I want to say that just very recently, several colleagues have pointed out on Twitter the practices with auction, like the problematic practices in auction houses, especially with regard to Islamicate artifacts. And while these artifacts are beautiful, like, you know, the context of how they got all the way to the auction house, or like to the places whence they came before, that is the real interesting story. Like basically an object that has been around for hundreds of years, has an interesting story to tell, and that story should never be hidden under the carpet.
Thank you, Torsten. I would listen to you for hours on end, but we have about 20 minutes now, and enough questions to fill at least 5 hours. So I'll read the questions to you. I'll try and put them together in some order, but you know, the answers will have to be brief, because we don't have much time, but you have, your talk has raised a huge interest. And so thank you very much for this, as well as for all your work with us. Now, the first question that came in was from our colleague, Sahar Ahmed, and he's wondering whether you could tell us a little bit about Ahmed Taimur, the person, what led him to become a private collector.
Mm-hmm. Is that okay? So he comes from a family that was very wealthy. His grandfather and father both worked high up in the Egyptian state, and that family is also a very literary family. His sister Aisha is now known as one of the most famous Egyptian poetresses, you could say. His two sons, or two of his sons, became very important in the rise of the Egyptian novel and Egyptian theater in the 20th century. And so he had both the time and the interest in collecting books and manuscripts. This is the short answer.
Right. And Sahar also is asking whether the later acquisitions, especially the ones from the Indian subcontinent, are entirely in Arabic or also in Persian, for example.
So there is a number of collections in Trinity that I have not looked at. There is collections in Persian, also around 70 manuscripts. There are also items in Sanskrit and in what was back then called Hindustani. This should be Hindu today. So yeah, there are those collections. I have not looked at them. I've looked at the Arabic items because that's where my language skills lie.
Well, of course, yeah. Thank you. A slightly different question is from Christina Varad. Again, she thanks you for the talk. And could you speak a bit more about the book stamps? What were the distinctive traits? How did they differ across time and place? And she thanks you for your expertise. This is one of those, 2+ hours answers. If you could do it in a few minutes.
I'll try. So book stamps have been around in, I think in like Iran or in like Persian works since the 15th century. We have them also in the Ottoman heartlands and especially in the royal libraries at around the same time or a bit later. And they take, like, because those are like large-scale libraries, but also people with like great means, those take all kinds of shapes. You have rectangles, octagons, circles, ovals, and even tear-shaped ones. So the situation is a bit different in Egypt and Syria since the late 18th century. And I would like it's still my speculation, it's not yet my argument, is that you have actually, you have smaller scale stamps that were actually used as seal rings and often used for documentary practices as well. And a lot of people use them in addition to writing by hand an ex libris in a book, and then they sign it with the stamp as an additional document or certification that it's them. And what you have then is a lot of very small stamps. They're like less than 2 centimeters in diameter and often enough only give you a name and a date. So, but they still retain some of these shapes that I've mentioned before.
Thank you. And obviously you will get in touch, you friends and colleagues and audience out there, get in touch with Torsten after the talk to continue the conversation. Now there's a big one from our friend Jane Maxwell, and it's actually the topic I was going to raise at the end, but as always, Jane beat me to it, and it's about decolonization of archives. So, Jane reminds us that in libraries everywhere, curators are interested in the decolonization of the archive, in speaking transparently about attitudes of historical collectors to the material they collected from other cultures. And what did you find in your time with us about attitudes of the 17th century librarians in Trinity towards the growing Arabic collections, which is something that you described, but can you contextualize
So from the librarians themselves, I don't think we have a lot of, I have not seen a lot of materials where they explicitly address that. And one thing that I can say about the 17th century is those Arabic manuscripts were not treated as a separate category. They were rather treated as integral parts of private collections that came into Trinity. So all the Huntington manuscripts are noted in the catalogs as coming from Huntington, and he also inscribed his own name in every one of those manuscripts. So in terms of decolonization is a big topic, and it's a very important topic. And I don't think that I can answer that even if I take all the 20 minutes that are left.
No.
But I want to say I see a certain difference in between those early acquisitions and later acquisitions, exactly because that whole hegemonic position of Ireland as part of the British world system. No, let me start over. The British world system was not in place as it was in the 19th century. So means of force and means of extraction of items of cultural value were not in place in the same way. I would say that these 17th century acquisitions were made on eye level, very much like the British also bought spices from the Ottoman Empire at the time. And one of the things that I'm certain of is that the manuscript market in the Ottoman Empire was a local and regional thing. It was meant to cater for a local and regional audience. And that's why British collectors could get access there. And it was not a manuscript market that was catered to a European or global audience.
Right. That's very interesting. And I suppose, the ways one raises these questions and the way one answers these questions leads to controversies, to conversations that are very useful to have, but that one has to handle carefully and sensitively. And I think you're doing that very well. Now we have a couple of more specific questions and a final one for Katrina in the hub. Now, specific questions, one from Tyler Brand, who's very happy to see you and hear you talk again. And he would like to know how useful the manuscripts might be for a social, environmental historian of medieval Syria and Lebanon. Do you know?
So from the content, I would say that there is definitely something for the social historian. There is less so for the environmental historian. But I should add that we found a manuscript that is potentially from Syria. We could not really figure out where it's from exactly. That contains a piece of snakeskin. So there is your environmental history.
Oh, I see. I see. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I want to say there is an interesting manuscript that is interesting to someone working on medieval Syria, because it's a work. So there are several. There is like a work by Tajuddin As-Subki, who is a famous Damascene jurist. And then there is another manuscript which was copied in the early 14th century by, I don't remember his name now, by a person who also wrote 2 manuscripts which are now at Chester Beatty Library. So it's an interesting connection there, that this manuscript came to Dublin 3 centuries before the other 2 manuscripts also came to Dublin. So
thank you. And then and the last one about content is from John Dillon, Regius Professor of Greek Emeritus, who would like to know if any of the manuscripts involve translations of Greek philosophy or science, Plotinus, Proclus, theology of Aristotle, or anything like that. There was another question about, whether there was, the content was primarily theological or not, but, I had to select. So do you happen to know, because obviously you will have looked at the content, so do you happen to know if there's anything that would be useful in this case to
yes, basically the content of the manuscripts is very much dependent on the interests of the collector. And at the time, neither of the collectors were very interested in ancient philosophy, or so it seems.
Yeah.
The Usher collection has several Christian Arabic texts, but they are mostly concerned with biblical history or contain prayers or sermons. One of them also contains a treatise by Ambrose Usher, James Usher's younger brother, on the origins of the Arabic language, but there is not so much on philosophy. And Robert Huntington collected, for the most part, works on Islamic law and astronomy in the widest sense. So there is, for instance, he donated a calendar from, I think it was the 1630s, that gives you a lot of information about the basically when so on the moon phases and also on certain religious holidays. But there is not much of philosophy in there.
So not the traditional, what you would expect, Platonic or Aristotelian.
I don't think that. I think that that time, while that was still happening with the Euclid, for instance, like the Arabic Euclid can be found in Marsh's library in a printed volume. So that's like the late 16th, early 17th century. But then the interest in those languages had moved on to more religious and therefore political aspects. Since the 17th century was a time of religious upheaval and a lot of religiously defined conflicts, one could say. They were one of the main reasons behind the engagement with Arabic texts was to find a foundation to win over Eastern Christianity as potential allies, or convert Eastern Christians to either the Protestant or Catholic faith.
I see. Interesting. Torsten, to conclude, there's Katrina here. And what she says, we can all subscribe to. Hi, Torsten, thank you for being such a fabulous member of the Hub community, for achieving so much in such a short time. Terrific exhibition. Can you say, as your last word, a little on your work on manuscript in crisis? If you can. I can see Jane is back again.
It really depends on crisis. If we're referring to the current crisis, or the COVID crisis, let's say it this way, then I want to say that we should never forget that the manuscripts that have been put in one way or another online are not the only ones, or not even the majority of the manuscripts out there. We should not forget that Western institutions have had the luck of having received the funding for digitization, and we should not forget that there are other collections out there, including that of Ahmad Taimur, which is now in the Egyptian National Library, which might give a very different perspective on things than the manuscripts that we find online now. That is not to say that it's not a blessing that we have those manuscripts online, but we should forget that, you know, manuscript scholars and other disciplines as well talk about the survival bias. Which manuscripts did survive? This is dependent on networks and also traditions of preservation. So certain texts do survive in larger numbers, others do not. And with digitization, we have an added bias, like a digitization bias, so to say, because because certain repositories put up their manuscripts, but maybe not all of them. So how do we have to think about how do they choose which manuscripts to digitize first, and also which manuscripts to digitize at all, and then also which institutions don't digitize.
Thank you, Torsten. This is a wonderful note for me. Particularly, I work on texts that have not survived, and so I can relate to the survival bias point that you make. I can see Jane smiling at us, and it's 1:51. I thank you for this huge window into your fascinating research, and notes of thanks have already come through the chat, and I hope we will stay in touch with me, with Jane, with everyone, and that our paths will cross again soon in real.
Anna, I was going to say, you took the words out of my mouth. What a fascinating conversation, just redolent with that deep learning and understanding. It's been a revelation, Torsten. Obviously, I've had the privilege of reading the blogs. The exhibition, by the way, is absolutely fabulous. So well done again to you and everybody, our library colleagues who worked so hard with you. I mean, something to be hugely proud of. As a 17th century historian, you've just opened my eyes about many things. So very, very grateful to you for that. And Anna, that was just, as I say, a tremendous conversation that could go on. And hopefully, Torsten, you'll have an opportunity to follow up with people who have submitted questions through the chat function. So as is my responsibility now, I'm just going to do a few announcements and a few thank yous. Just to remind everybody that we are coming to the end of our academic year. We've got 2 other big events, though, we would love you to join us for. Tomorrow, we have a webinar organised by Shape ID on the gap between research and policy. Our own Jennifer Edmond, Mary Doyle and Jack Spappen will be speaking at that. It starts at noon, so at 1 o'clock Irish time, 12 o'clock Irish time, 1 o'clock European time. So please, 12 o'clock tomorrow for that webinar. The other thing I'd like to invite everybody to, which very much in tune with the conversation today, is on the 30th of June. We are having a special day celebration of the amazing work of Beyond 2022. It's the big project that is led by our colleague Peter Crooks, and it's called Unlocking the Archives. And it's about basically what was destroyed in 1922 on the 30th of June, and how the communities around the world have come together to actually reconstitute the archive that was destroyed. So please join us for that on the 30th of June as well. So all I want to do now is thank everybody for coming. It's been a great audience with fabulous questions. To thank Anna again for her role. Obviously, we've been working closely all together over the course of the year. It's been a privilege, Anna. Thank you for curating that lovely conversation over lunch. But above all, Torsten, to thank you again for everything that you've done during your fellowship, for what you have brought to our community in the hub, in the library, in Trinity, but also I think more widely. We're extremely grateful to you. And as everybody else has said, we wish you luck with the next phase of your career. Hopefully Dublin has an even more special place in your heart than it did before.
It does.
And that you'll continue to stay in touch, because there are a lot more manuscripts in the library that need your attention. This is just the beginning of a journey and a relationship with Trinity, and one that we hope will extend way into the future. So I want to thank Anna and the whole team at the Hub who has made today possible, especially Francesca. So without further ado, wherever you are, in your kitchens, in your bedrooms, in your attics, on your porches, let's thank Torsten in the customary way. Goodbye, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.